Glendale, Arizona, November 28, 1994. The desert sun had long passed its peak when the unmarked, steel-bodied Wells Fargo van pulled into the parking lot behind the Arrowhead Mall. It was a modest weekday, quiet, uneventful, the kind of day that lulled security guards into routine and bystanders into disinterest. Inside the vehicle sat two men, armored in routine and duty. One remained at the wheel, eyes on the rearview mirror, habitually scanning. The other stepped out and into the department store, following company protocol to retrieve the weekend's cash deposit, a sum that, unbeknownst to many, totaled just north of $1 million. For minutes, that's all it took. When the courier returned, the armored truck had vanished, completely, along with the 61-year-old driver behind the wheel, John Maygosh. No gunfire, no witnesses, no tire squeal on asphalt, just silence. At 1:37 p.m., local police received a 911 call. A missing armored vehicle wasn't just a local matter. It triggered federal concern. The money was federally insured, and protocol dictated that the FBI be looped in immediately. Before sundown, FBI agents from a Phoenix field office arrived on scene. The area had already been combed by Glendale PD, but what they found, or rather, what they didn't, was telling. There were no shattered windows, no shell casings, no chaos, only a broken pair of eyeglasses near the curb, and a single cigarette, but still warm to the touch. It was a kind of crime that didn't make noise, but left a thunderous echo. John Maygosh wasn't the kind of man who strayed from the path. A former Marine, known among colleagues as strict but fair, a grandfather who never missed a birthday. Investigators pulled his personnel file, spoke with family, co-workers. The narrative was clear. Maygosh wasn't the kind to stage a getaway. The thought lingered for a moment. Was he in on it? But as Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth, the FBI's lead on the case, reviewed the mounting evidence or lack thereof, that possibility withered. This wasn't a runaway. It was an execution. And whoever planned it knew the playbook. Hours turned into evening. Just before 9 p.m., a parishioner arriving from Monday night bingo at a Sun City church noticed something peculiar. A white van idling in the empty lot, engine humming like a forgotten machine. When officers arrived, the license plates confirmed the worst. The missing armored truck. It was locked from the inside, fortified steel meant to repel bullets and pry bars. No way in without the keys. But through the glass, agents could see what they'd been dreading all day. On the floor of the cab, slumped motionless, was the unmistakable silhouette of a body. FBI technicians took over the scene with surgical precision. Once the vehicle was breached, using keys secured from the company, they confirmed it. John Maygosh, still in uniform, lay cold, a single bullet wound to the head. His Wells Fargo badge still pinned to his chest. Blood pooled beneath him, but something didn't line up. There was no forced entry. No damage to the doors. Not even a smudge on the bulletproof glass. Which meant only one thing. Maygosh had opened that door himself. But why? What remained inside the van painted a chilling picture. All of the coins, heavy, low value, untraceable, were left behind. A total of $132,000 in loose change still sat locked in bins. But the real prize, the stacks of cash and commercial checks, nearly $920,000 worth, were gone, stolen cleanly, efficiently, and now vanished. In the crime world, this wasn't smash and grab. It was methodical, surgical. The FBI had seen this pattern before. And as Agent Chenoweth noted to his team, if there's no sign of a struggle, odds are the robbers were inside the system. They weren't chasing amateurs. They were hunting professionals, men who studied law enforcement tactics and used that knowledge to subvert the very rules that were meant to stop them. And somewhere out there, someone who knew Maygosh's habits, someone who knew that he sometimes cracked his window to smoke, had used that window to end his life. But this wasn't just a robbery. This was a murder. Federal jurisdiction was now absolute. The case officially became a joint homicide investigation, led by the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force, working in tandem with Glendale detectives. The Bureau's expertise in behavioral analysis, surveillance, and technical intelligence would soon prove to be the linchpin in a case that would lead them into the shadowy world of ex-cops, bounty hunters, and betrayal. And so began a pursuit that would stretch across the deserts of Arizona into the underbelly of former law enforcement, where the line between justice and greed blurred into darkness. The morning after the discovery of the body, the FBI's Phoenix Field office was humming like a war room, maps spread across tables, surveillance routes marked, interview transcripts being analyzed under halogen light. Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth, seasoned, sharp-eyed, took charge of the case briefing. His assessment was clear. This was an inside job, or someone with insider knowledge. The killer knew where to stand, when to shoot, and how to vanish. And he was right. There had been no firefight, no alarms, just one man with a bullet to head, and nearly $1 million gone without a trace. Forensics dug deep. The bullet fragments retrieved from Megash's skull told a partial story. .22 caliber, low power, small entry, fatal precision. No powder burns on the skin meant the shot came from just far enough away to avoid leaving residue, but not far enough to miss. And that's when it clicked. Megash's smoking habit, frowned upon by company policy, but tolerated, had opened a window into the cab. Literally. He often cracked the door just a few inches to let smoke drift into the desert air. And through that sliver of vulnerability, the killer had struck. But who would know this tiny detail? Who had studied his habits from a distance? Witnesses were scarce. Cameras at the mall were either too far or too fuzzy. But by midweek, investigators caught a break. One that would quietly unlock the case. A tip came in, almost casual at first. A resident from nearby Sun City, a retiree named Edward Morgan, recalled seeing a red pickup truck and a white van speeding past a church lot on the day of the crime. The red truck, he said, had followed closely behind, almost too closely. It wasn't much, but it was something. And when a man like Morgan, ex-military, sharp memory, steady demeanor, spoke, the FBI listened. They brought him in for forensic hypnosis, a controversial technique, but one used not for courtroom evidence, rather to jolt memory loose from the haze of time. What Morgan remembered next would steer the investigation into unexpected territory. Under hypnosis, Morgan described a man riding in the passenger seat of the white van, a man with a beard, narrow eyes, and a calm demeanor. He couldn't remember the name, but he remembered the face. From that face, the FBI built a composite sketch, a rough portrait, but good enough. They released it to the public, and someone noticed. New Year's Eve, 1994. Just as most people were picking out champagne and watching the countdown clock tick toward midnight, a Mesa, Arizona detective reached out with a tip. A woman, nervous, jumpy, had confided in a friend that her boyfriend had said something strange after the armored truck heist made the news. Something about needing to kill a man and having a lot of cash all of a sudden. The friend's name? Judy Espinoza. And her boyfriend? James Yoda Greenham, a former prison guard, part-time bounty hunter, and very suddenly, a person of serious interest. Greenham, they would learn, had ties to another ex-corrections officer, Timothy Ring, known to law enforcement, and once even used as a confidential informant in smaller operations. Both men had military training, firearm certification, and knew the ins and outs of law enforcement protocols. The FBI now had two suspects, both former insiders, both capable, both dangerous. But to tie them to the crime, they need more than character profiles and whispered rumors. They needed money trails and voice recordings. So the Bureau did what does best. It watched and it listened. Surveillance teams fanned out. Greenham and Ring were followed day and night. Aerial units kept watch from the skies. From the outside, their lives seemed mundane, but their bank activity, or lack thereof, told another story. Neither had a job, but both were spending cash freely. Greenham upgraded his apartment, paid off debt, lived better. Ring, bold as ever, rebuilt his truck, bought new toys, and started flaunting wealth just under the radar of the IRS threshold. They were careful, but not careful enough. The FBI wanted more. They wanted a bug inside Greenham's apartment. where they suspected planning had taken place, and where Ring often visited. On a quiet evening, a tactical unit moved in. The door opened. Suddenly, a blaring siren. An alarm had been triggered. Agents froze, heartbeats pounding. But to their surprise, it wasn't high-tech. Just a motion sensor on top of the refrigerator. They flipped the switch and continued the mission. Minutes later, the surveillance tail radioed in. Ring was on his way, driving fast, heading toward Greenham's apartment. They needed time, any time, so the team called in a uniformed officer to stop Ring for speeding. Pulled over just blocks away, the suspect smiled, nodded, and took the ticket. By the time he arrived at the apartment, the FBI was gone. The bug was in place. Now they waited, and what came through that wire in the weeks that followed would be both chilling and crucial. The suspects were talking about the news, about the FBI, about what they'd done, and what they might have to do if things got tight. The pieces were falling into place. And the Bureau? It was closing in. As January bled into February, the FBI's operation grew bolder and sharper. What began as shadows on paper, faces, names, theories, was now shaping into a profile with weight and consequence. They had Greenham, the twitchy ex-guard with a guilty conscience. They had Ring, the strategist, cool, confident, always 3 steps ahead. But there was still a third ghost in the machine, the man from the sketch, the one described by the hypnotized witness, seen in the passenger seat of the stolen armored van. The Bureau had a face, but no name, until a bounty hunter came forward. His name was Michael Sanders, and he had a bone to pick. He knew Greenham and Ring, had worked with them on off-the-books jobs in the past. He'd helped them surveil armored vehicles, watched their fascination grow into something darker. But when the job finally went down, they cut him out. Now, Sanders wanted to settle the score. He told the FBI about a third accomplice, an older man they called Fergie, real name William Ferguson, a former Phoenix police officer, now retired and now very much on the FBI's radar. Investigators pulled Ferguson's personnel records. What they found confirmed the worst. 20 years on the force, disciplined more than once for questionable conduct, left the job under a cloud of suspicion. Since then, he'd taken up work at a camera store in Paradise Valley Mall, of all places, the same kind of shopping center targeted in the heist. Coincidence? Not a chance. Surveillance teams were reassigned. Now, Ferguson was under constant watch, and what they saw only deepened the Bureau's resolve. Like the others, Fergie had no visible income, yet plenty of spending money. A new car, new gear, nights out, cash tips. More importantly, he was often seen in close company with both Ring and Greenham. The triangle was complete. At this point, the Bureau moved to the next phase. Trash pulls. Every week, agents in unmarked vans recovered garbage bags from the suspects' homes, sifting through used napkins, receipts, coffee cups, looking for anything they'd missed. It was in Ring's trash that they found it. The quiet, smoking gun. A handful of index cards, scrawled with notes. Routes. Schedules. Numbers. Handwriting matched the Ring. Each card outlined times and patterns for armored vehicle pickups across Glendale. It was a blueprint. A playbook. It wasn't just surveillance anymore. This was premeditation. With the walls closing in, the FBI doubled down. They'd already bugged Greenham's apartment. Now, they tapped the phones, landlines and cell phones for all 3 men. But they needed more than passive listening. They needed the suspects to panic. So they did what seasoned agents do when the moment is right. They strategically leaked a press statement. The media reported that the investigation was heating up, that leads were being followed, that a composite sketch was in circulation. The results were almost immediate. Greenham read the article and cracked. He called Ring frantic. His voice trembled. "There was a card in my door," he whispered. "A cop's card. They're on to us." Ring, calm as ever, told him to relax. "Don't worry about it. They don't have anything." But Greenham wasn't buying it. "I swear, if one more cop comes to my door, I'm burying the money." That phrase, burying the money, was a metaphor. To the agents listening, it was a direct reference to the stolen cash. They had him, but the FBI wasn't ready to make arrests just yet. They wanted to see what the suspects would do under pressure. Would they flee? Would they destroy evidence? Would they slip? So they delivered a card, physically, to Greenham's door. A detective's business card with nothing but a scribbled note. Lead number 173. It meant nothing and everything. It was just vague enough to haunt a guilty man's imagination. Greenham exploded. He got in his car, tailgate by the surveillance team, and called Ring again, yelling into the receiver. "They're building a case," he snapped. "They got files, numbers. We need to shut this down." Ring tried to calm him. "You need to keep your mouth shut." But it was too late. Greenham, caught in the whirlpool of his own conscience, had already started to spiral. And that spiral was exactly what the FBI had been waiting for. By mid-February 1995, nearly 3 months since the van vanished from the Arrowhead Mall parking lot, the noose was tightening. The FBI had everything short of a confession. 3 suspects with no jobs and suspicious spending habits. 8 paper trail of surveillance notes. Wiretaps brimming with cryptic, nervous chatter. And now, a panicked outburst from a man who clearly knew where the bodies were buried. But Agent Stephen Chenoweth wasn't after hunches. He wanted evidence that would stick in court, under cross-examination, beyond reasonable doubt. So they decided to move. On February 16th, coordinated teams were dispatched across Arizona. Synchronized to the second, James Greenham was the first to fall. Arrested without resistance, his eyes wide, his hands trembling. He asked no questions, said no words. William Ferguson was more difficult. When agents arrived, the former cop tried to bolt, his instincts from years on the job kicking in. But the FBI had prepared for this. He was tackled, cuffed, and read his rights before he hit the ground. Timothy Ring, the calculated mastermind, required a different approach. He was lured brilliantly under the pretense of helping the FBI. See, months prior, Ring had inserted himself into case, offering to act as a consultant for the Bureau. It was a clever ruse, a way to learn what agents knew, while pretending to be helpful, but it also gave him an opening. That morning, an agent he'd worked with in the past placed a call, told him there were new photos to review, maybe related to the sketch. Could he come down to the office? Ring agreed. He walked into the Phoenix Field office, relaxed, unarmed, unsuspecting. That's when 2 tactical instructors, quiet as shadows, closed in. One moved fast. The other moved faster. And in seconds, Ring was on the floor, stunned, disarmed, and staring up at the ceiling of a building he thought he understood. The hunter had walked into his own trap. With all 3 men in custody, the interrogation phase began. Ferguson lawyered up. Ring said nothing. But Greenham cracked. In the quiet of the interview room, with federal charges stacking like bricks on his back, James Greenham asked for a deal, and in return, he offered the truth. He told them everything. It started months before the heist. Casual conversations turned into quiet obsession. Timothy Ring, the architect, had the idea first. He'd worked in law enforcement, knew their weaknesses, knew how armored truck pickups worked, the blind spots, the routines, the human habits. They scouted locations together, watched drivers, measured timing. They noticed one in particular, John Magosh, the man they would eventually kill, had a habit of cracking the driver's side door just a few inches to smoke while the messenger was inside. That was all they needed. Greenham explained how, on the morning of November 28th, the trio set their plan in motion. He and Ferguson waited near the department store out of sight. Ring, armed with a .22 caliber rifle and a homemade silencer, parked nearby in a red pickup truck. Stolen plates already in place. When Magosh opened the door, just like they knew he would, Ring took aim for concealed angle and fired. One shot. No witnesses. No noise. They loaded the body into the van, drove it across town, parked it in the empty church lot, transferred the cash into the red truck, and then vanished. The coins, too heavy to carry and too hard to launder, were left behind. The van, locked tight, was meant to confuse investigators. A puzzle with no missing pieces. Greenham said they drove into the desert. burned their clothes, buried the license plate, and when asked if he could take agents to the site, he nodded. He led them into the arid scrubland just outside city limits, and there, beneath 6 inches of dust and rock, was a charred debris from a heist, and the stolen license plate, the same one partially described by the hypnotized witness. It matched. Exactly. But that wasn't the end. Greenham admitted something else. After dumping the van, they went back to Ring's garage, split the money 3 ways. On a workbench, Ring used index cards to calculate each man's cut. F for Fergie, Y for Yoda, T for Tim. The total match would have been stolen. Greenham said Ring pocketed over $270,000. Ferguson, about $64,000. The rest was spent or stashed, somewhere still unknown. Then came the final moment, when Ring ordered him to burn the rest of the evidence. The rifle, the checklist, the planning notes. All of it, but not everything burned. And not everyone kept quiet. With Greenham's confession, the Bureau had its backbone. Now came the time to tie it all together, with bank records, property receipts, and more. The evidence was strong, but the case wasn't over yet, because in the heart of a courtroom, where jurors watch and weigh every glance, truth alone isn't enough. You need motive. You need intent. You need to paint the picture, every corner of it, until there's nowhere left for doubt to hide. And the FBI, seasoned in shadows and strategy, was ready to do just that. By the spring of 1995, the case that had once felt like a phantom crime, clean, silent, surgical, now stood fully fleshed out, brick by brick, under the unforgiving lights of a courtroom. The suspect had faces, the motive had teeth, and the paper trail, once invisible, now shouted its truth from evidence bags and wiretap logs. But Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth and the federal prosecutors knew one thing above all. A confession wasn't a conviction. They still had to win the jury. The Maricopa County courtroom was packed, journalists in the back, the families of the accused up front, and, perhaps most haunting of all, the empty space where John Magosh's loved ones once sat. He had no children, no surviving wife, only a daughter who spoke once to the media and never again. The jury pool was selected with precision. The prosecution wanted no one with ties to law enforcement, not because they distrusted police, but because the defendants had once worn badges themselves. That changed everything. James Greenham was the first to take a deal. He pled guilty to second-degree murder and armed robbery in exchange for a reduced sentence, 27.5 years. No parole. He told the truth, or enough of it, and stuck to it on the stand. The courtroom was silent as he described the shot, the smoke, the transfer, the burial. William Ferguson, the ex-cop turned co-conspirator, followed suit. He pled guilty to armed robbery and accessory after the fact. 17 years behind bars. His deal was lighter. Prosecutors believed he didn't pull the trigger, but his silence had helped cover it up. That left Timothy Ring, the architect, the sniper, the man who thought he could outthink the system. He refused any deal, claimed innocence, denied involvement, but the evidence said otherwise. Prosecutors began with the index cards, each labeled by initial, each amount totaled to the exact sum stolen. They introduced a red pickup truck, found in Ring's garage, the same vehicle spotted tailing the van near the church lot. They showed bank records, IRS filings, or rather, the lack thereof. Ring had no income in 1994, none in 1995, but made cash purchases that added up to nearly 6 figures. Then came the surveillance audio. The jury heard Ring's voice cold calculated, telling Greenham to keep calm, to trust a plan, to bury the money if it came to that. There were no direct confessions. No, I did it moments, but there didn't need to be. The weight of implication, of motive, of means, of meticulous planning, crushed the presumption of innocence with every passing hour. Then came the weapon. While the murder rifle had been destroyed, investigators recovered ammunition and ballistic accessories from Ring's home, enough to build a picture of the type of firearm used. It matched the entry wound. It matched Greenham's statement. It matched the method. And the method, they argued, was uniquely Ring's signature. Precise, cold, silent. just like he'd trained for. The defense did what it could. They claimed Greenham was lying to save himself. They questioned the hypnosis-based sketch. They argued the money trail was circumstantial, but none of it stuck. The story, when told in sequence, supported by the FBI's methodical collection of evidence, felt inevitable, like gravity pulling truth to the floor. On December 6, 1996, the jury filed back into the room. They didn't take long. Timothy Ring was found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit armed robbery, burglary. Then came sentencing. In Arizona, murder during commission of robbery made Ring eligible for the ultimate penalty. After deliberation, the sentence was handed down: death. Ring now sits on death row, awaiting his fate at the Arizona State Prison in Florence. To the agents, detectives, and prosecutors who worked the case, it was a rare kind of justice, the kind that comes with silence. No celebration, no applause, just the knowledge that they'd restored balance, that a man who thought himself above the law was, in the end, undone by it. But behind the verdict was something greater, a testament to the FBI's relentless pursuit. It wasn't luck that cracked the case. It was strategy, coordination, technology, patience. From the forensic hypnosis, to the planted wiretap, to the pressure tactics and stage media leaks, every step had been calculated, every move earned. The Bureau had reached into the quiet desert Glendale and dragged the truth into the light. The sun still rises over Glendale, Arizona, quiet, unwavering, like it did that Monday afternoon in 1994, when a Wells Fargo van vanished without sound or struggle. But the memory of that day lingers in the minds of agents. In the empty locker once assigned to John Magosh, in the vault of the Bureau, where the case file sits, sealed, complete, but never forgotten. Because what happened here wasn't just a theft. It was a betrayal of uniform, a cold, calculated breach of the very oath meant to uphold justice. The men behind the heist weren't drifters or street thugs. They were former prison guards, trained in tactics. One had worn a Phoenix police badge for 2 decades. They used that knowledge not to protect, but to infiltrate, to manipulate routine, to twist the predictability of a man like John Magosh, a loyal, quiet veteran, into an opening for murder. But they underestimated one thing. The FBI doesn't blink. When the trail went cold, they dug deeper. When the suspects got quiet, they turned up the volume, with taps, bugs, pressure plays, and patience. This was a case that couldn't be solved with fingerprints or security footage. It had to be unraveled, one wiretap at a time, one sleepless night at a time. And slowly they did. They found the card in the trash, the panic phone call, the buried license plate. The bearded man in the passenger seat, remembered under hypnosis and confirmed by surveillance. They listened, watched, waited, until the walls closed in, not with sirens, but with precision. For the agents involved, it wasn't about vengeance. It was about order, about pulling a single thread of deception until an entire web collapsed. And for the Bureau, it became a model case, a quiet testament to how method and persistence, not brute force, bring criminals to justice. Today, James Greenham still sits behind bars, serving every day of his 27. William Ferguson, 2, long past retirement, no longer a cop, no longer free. And Timothy Ring waits on death row, a man who once trained with rifle in the desert heat, now caged in concrete, watching the clock tick toward his final hour. But the story doesn't end there. For law enforcement nationwide, this case reshaped how inside jobs are viewed, how officers and agents are trained to recognize threats from within. And for the FBI, it reaffirmed a core truth, that no badge makes a man untouchable, that no plan is perfect, and that in the end, even the most silent crimes leave behind an echo. This was the story of a van that vanished, of a man who lit a cigarette and opened the door to his own death, of 3 professionals who thought they could rewrite the rules, and a team of federal agents who reminded them that justice doesn't flinch. Not in Arizona. Not anywhere.